Hello, welcome into In the Pocket Across the Pond. Looking ahead to week 9 already. It's really flying by. As always this week, we talk about the winners and losers of the previous week, what teams are really good. Can anybody tell me what team is good in the NFL this year? We also look at the players who absolutely blew up, CeeDee Lamb, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Brown again, and the players who didn't do too well. I'm looking at you, Raiders. We also talk about some really, really hot news. Speaking of the Raiders, a lot of coaching sackings and some player acquisitions at the trade deadline. And then we look at a bit of a mid-season review, talking about who our fantasy MVP is halfway through the regular season, who we think the real-life MVP is, and if our Super Bowl picks have changed. And then, as always, we look at our projection beaters, the guys we think you should pick up on waivers, and we look ahead to the next week's games. Plenty of stars this week: Patrick Mahomes, Chet Johnson, Tyreek Hill. It's going to be a great week. I'm Lewis. I'm joined by Alex and Alex, as always. If you want to get in touch with us, email us at inthepocketacrossthepond@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at inthepocketacrossthepond, and you guessed it, this is In the Pocket Across the Pond.
So, lads, bit of a change this week. We're first time this season we are recording all remotely. None of us are together. So, if you notice a change, in let's say change in the chemistry between me and Lou, that's like maybe we have some for once. That's the reason. That's the reason for
Only
it.
ways up.
Yes. But let's get straight into those week 8 games. Blockbuster week, no one on buys, and I thought this was best red zone of the year. You agree so far?
Yeah,
Definitely up there. Yeah.
Loads of fantasy points scored, some really good games. Aside from that one in New York, yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I just want to start off by saying I hope none of our listeners watched the Jets versus Giants, the Jags versus Steelers, or the Texans versus the Panthers. If they did, we probably lost those listeners because they're done with the NFL.
Sorry, mistakes. Well, I mean, apart from the one in New Jersey.
Yeah, of course. But where else to start than cue the yeehaw? Yeah! It's the Rams 20, 43 Cowboys, and this is what happens when the Cowboys play at home. When the Cowboys play inside, when the Cowboys play on turf, it's like a track meet, though that defensive line is just so fast. You can't stop them. If there was any incentive for the Cowboys to be like, we need the number 1 seed because no one is coming to here and winning, and wherever the Super Bowl is, look, we'll worry about the Super Bowl when we get there. It's after this week. I mean, I thought that was pretty damn impressive. But what did you think, resident Cowboys hater Alex Sharples?
It was a very good win. I don't think anyone was too surprised. Would have maybe liked to see the Rams put up a few more points. Again, Cooper Kupp going by the wayside. But, I mean, after 2 quarters, it was done. I mean, I'm 33-7, 33-9 at halftime, was it? I mean, at that point, it was just over, and it was sort of a matter of how much it was going to be. CeeDee Lamb, finally, drafted him in the 2nd round. This was his welcome to the party moment. 45 points or so. Unbelievable. Let's have more than this. I mean, obviously it's the Cowboys, so they'll find a way for the wheels to fall off, but right now, let's keep throwing CeeDee Lamb the ball.
Incorrect.
Only if people like the Cardinals cheat against them. If more teams do what the Cardinals did.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Lou?
Yeah, great. Most dominant performance of the week. Felt even better when you had, these better teams losing as well. The Chiefs, the 49ers, because it was a bit like, well, who are the good teams then? Well, it's the Cowboys. Yeah. And, we're Cowboys fans, Al, but I'm just thinking in my head, like, who... I think I think Dallas Cowboys at home is the toughest matchup to go to if you're a team. I'm not saying they're unbeatable at home, but I think they are a tough team to play in Jerry World, which, as you say, is even more incentive to be like, let's get home field advantage. Because if the Cowboys have home field advantage going into the playoffs, wow, that is great. That is fantastic for them. Or I mean, it's down to the turf as well, isn't it? But no, at home with those fans, with that field, yeah. Tell me who beats them.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of hard places to go, I would have said Levi Stadium was a really hard place to go, and I think it still is. But Joe Cool's back in town. The Bengals kind of wiping the floor with the 49ers. I'm going to speak about it later on in the podcast about my feelings on what this means for the Bengals and the fantasy pieces going forward. But let's just say I think the arrow is definitely pointing up. Would you agree, Lou?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. The Bengals do this every year, and every year they seem to leave it. They seem to either leave it a little bit further into the season, or they play even worse at the start of the season to convince us that, okay, they're done, wheels are falling off, and then it gets to sort of a third of the way through the season, and then they just look amazing again. I don't think that game against the 49ers was ever in doubt. The Bengals always looked like they were going to win that game. And that is scary for the Ravens, really, and the other teams in the AFC. Yeah.
Now, Sharples, talk to me about the 49ers, and I'll just tell you, I've got a theory, first of all. I think when they signed Christian McCaffrey last year, they made a bit of a deal with the devil. And this devil said, you can sign Christian McCaffrey and he will make your offense completely unstoppable and nuclear. But next season you will lose to, and it just said Ohio team, and they didn't check the schedule. They didn't realize that they were playing two Ohio teams back to back weeks, and that's why we get two losses. That's the only way I can describe this seemingly unstoppable San Francisco team of 2 weeks ago losing two straight games. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think the injuries are starting to pile up for them as well, and it is three in a row.
Three. Apologies, three.
I think the injuries are piling up. Obviously, we know about Debo. I mean, we don't really mention it as much on this, with it not being not being too fantasy relevant, but obviously the O-line, Trent Williams, who's an absolute monster, he's injured as well. McCaffrey coming off the oblique, Purdy got a little knock. I'm still struggling to be too worried about them long term. I still think they're a great team. The offense is scary, defense is scary, and also just added Chase Young at the trade deadline, the pass rusher from the Commanders. I personally think that's the move. I can see that you pulling a face, Lou. He was number 2 pick for a reason. I think that'll be a really nice addition. I think, I'm still more positive about the Niners than I'm the Bengals going forward personally. I still think there's a few more losses in the Cincinnati team, whereas I think the Niners will push on. But all I can put it down to is injuries, because, like you say, when you look at the team on paper, it's absolutely stacked, and they should be realistically about 7-1 based on who they've got. But I don't know. Sometimes, like you say, the stars don't lie, right? Maybe they did make a deal with the devil. But all I know is McCaffrey tied the record for 17 games in a row with a touchdown, something like that. So
he did indeed.
Maybe worth making a deal with the devil, because he's an absolute
baller. And you see, I saw something strange on Sunday morning which didn't make any sense to me until later in the day. So obviously we've got to talk about the Broncos beating the Chiefs. But when the Broncos beat the Chiefs, when I woke up on Sunday morning and saw the pig flying over my house, it all made sense, because the Broncos beat...
Patrick Mahomes was sick. He was sick.
He was sick. He was as sick as Bijan Robinson a few weeks ago. Yeah. What happened though? first of all, we were promised this amazing snow game, and it was like an avalanche of snow an hour before kickoff, and then they kicked off, and there was not a single speck, not a single snowflake to be seen. What on earth happened, Lou?
I think, listen, the Broncos are pretty rubbish, but I feel like that 70-point loss has inflated the stats. That defense is not as bad as the stats seem, and they've definitely gotten better. So, it looks like a skewed matchup, really. Like, whoa, the Dolphins put up 70 points, Mahomes is going to put up 60 on them or whatever like that. It's like, no, it's not the case. They're a better defense than that. Plus, I mean, there's ebbs and flows. The 49ers are in a bit of that right now. This Chiefs team, maybe a combination of Denver being at home, being a bit riled up for the game, Mahomes not being fully at it, fully himself. Stuff like this can happen. And these Chiefs games all year have been quite cagey and low scoring, even the ones when they've won. So, it's going to happen. It's not really soured me on the Chiefs, but good for the Broncos. Fair enough. That was a good win.
I'll tell you what the problem was, Lou. It's on the last episode. You forecasted that Mahomes would get at least 4 touchdowns.
Did I?
Oh, yeah.
Trick or treat segment.
Trick or treat.
You said it was a lovely treat.
Ooh. It actually had razor blades in it, Lou.
Yeah. See, that was me playing a trick on all of you listeners. I was going deep into the trick or treat segment.
Right. Well, we'll speak about us playing a trick on the listeners in a little bit. It will become clear. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs do this every year. They'll have a weird loss here and there, and they'll still end up finishing on 12-4, 12-5. It would be, wouldn't it? 17-game season.
I have to say though, I do agree with Lou. I think they have looked shaky this year. I mean, for them to be 6-2 is a little bit deceiving. It reminds me a little bit of that Titans team from a couple of years ago that finished. Was it 13-4 or 14-3 in the regular season? And it was like they could have had like 7 more losses in that. Like with the Chiefs, they've been close in a few games. I mean, I'm sure they'll get it together. Obviously, trust the Andy Reid process. I think Taylor Swift wasn't in the audience, which by all accounts is having an effect on Travis Kelce's yardage. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the Chiefs. I do have to say.
Okay. Well, elsewhere, plenty of high-scoring games. We had the Bucks 18-24 Bills, Eagles 38-31 Commanders, Falcons 23-28 Titans, Patriots 17-31 Dolphins, Saints 38-27 Colts, Browns 20-24 Seahawks, Ravens 31-24 Cardinals. Great weekend for NFL scoring, for fantasy scoring. Chargers and Lions back on track as well. And a play for the Lions, who I'm sure we'll speak about soon. But our categories: impressive victory, Lou.
Cowboys, most convincing win of the week. Looked fantastic. Cowboys all day.
Ooh, Sharples.
I went for more of an individual player, but Will Levis on his debut, absolutely slinging it. It's impressive. I'm not saying it's going to carry on. I'm not saying he's going to do it again, but I mean, he was just hurling that ball like he was playing in the garden. So yeah, Titans and Will Levis for me.
Yeah. I wish the listeners could see the face that I was pulling then. I'm going to say Cowboys as well. And speaking of Will Levis, my not buying it win is the Titans. I may as well just say the whole Will Levis spiel now. I'm not that impressed. The guy's got a big arm. We knew he had a big arm. The first touchdown pass to me was, and I'm no expert. I'm no expert whatsoever. I'm just saying what I saw. Say what you see. Offensive pass interference. The ball.
Wrong.
Okay, he's thrown it. He's thrown it. Okay, inbounds, which is good because the route from Hopkins was awful because he was basically out of bounds, but he's pulled the DB away and gone and got the ball, which was kind of nowhere near him. I don't know what the Falcons were playing at for the second touchdown, but the ball was behind Hopkins again, a bunch of throws that were kind of all over the place, and he just seemed pretty rushed. The last two touchdowns were all right, but again, it was a bit like there's just a wide open DeAndre Hopkins. If you look at the third touchdown, the move that Hopkins, and this is how Sharples, you're waiting for this. This is my sincere apology to DeAndre Hopkins for saying he was washed, because the move that he puts on the DB for that third touchdown is unbelievable. He runs towards him. He kind of hesitates for a second, sees the DB come towards him, and then just puts his foot on the gas, and he's wide open. Yeah, but I don't know. I just think it's a team that didn't know what they were getting in Will Levis in terms of the Falcons' defense. The guy's got a big arm. He kind of threw it up there, not particularly accurately, but high enough that someone could run underneath it. And
I want to see the death stare that
did
Ryan
it four
Tannehill.
Times.
I want to see the death stare that Ryan Tannehill gave these wide receivers when they go into the locker room after that game, and all the receivers are like, wide open, and Ryan Tannehill's just sat in the corner staring them down, because he's like, you weren't this open at any point this year for me. And they all sort of like scurry past him really awkwardly. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not. I hope Will Levis makes me eat my words, but I wasn't like completely blown away. It just seemed like a pro day where guys kind of like throw like a 70-yard Hail Mary to someone that's got no one guarding him. But yeah, anyway, Lou, not buying it, win.
I gone for the New York Jets. Just because I'm not having this Zach Wilson won the game at 24 seconds, yep, no problem. Like, I'm not having it. Jets were 0-12 on third down. They only converted the first third down just before the 2-minute warning of the fourth quarter. They had 11 punts in the game. You know, Wilson saved his stats at the end of the game, sure, and in overtime, whatever. But, again, looked terrible. His ball security was terrible. The only reason the Jets happened to win the game is because the Giants were somehow even more awful on offense than them. So, yeah, the Jets.
Sharples.
And also, they Ray Finkled it at the end as well.
Yeah.
They did.
That game nearly tied the record for most punts in a game. I think it was 2 or 3 away. There was 24, I want to say.
Yeah, and there was over 1,000 yards worth of punts.
Yeah. I mean, great game for the punters watching, you know.
Fantastic game for the punters. Like, yeah.
Aspiring punters, yeah.
The Tress Way fans of the league.
Are you talking about just general fans, like as in punters? Or
yeah.
People...
And like young up-and-coming punters. Here you go, lads. That's how you do it.
No, but I'm talking like, you know, your punter that goes down the pub, you know, the British... Yeah. Yeah.
For not buying it, I went for the Bengals, which might be a bit controversial based because you guys seem pretty positive on them. I'm not saying they're not going to kick on from here. It's just I'm not ready to just jump back on that train just yet. So I want to give it a couple more weeks. So yeah, Bengals.
Worst team in the league. I'm going to say it's the Giants. What are you going to say, Lou?
I was also going to say Giants, but I'm going to change it up and say Raiders for reasons that will be delved into. I mean, the Raiders and the Giants they've both only scored over like 18 points one time this season. They're both terrible. So yeah, I'll go Raiders.
Mm-hmm. Sharps.
Yeah, I went Raiders as well. Like you say, Lou, both terrible. However, the Raiders are also miserable. So.
And the Raiders, I'm not having this, I'm sorry if this is me being ignorant, but, Max Crosby, he's one of the biggest, trash talkers in the league, quite a dirty player as well, which is alright if you can back it up, but it's like NFL doing these posts about Max Crosby, beware Max Crosby tonight. It's like, yeah, stop getting 40 points dropped on you and maybe people will be scared of you, mate. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, I think Crosby's a good player, but that defense is The defense is shocking. The most egregious thing about that coaching staff that isn't there anymore is that they just weren't good at anything. The team wasn't good at anything.
They were good at being bad.
Speaking of people who are good, though, weekly top 5 at each position. Quarterback, Sam Howell, number 1, Allen, Prescott, Burrow, and Hurts at number 5, Levis, Herbert, and Dobbs with good games. Dobbs with a good fantasy game, I should say. Running back, Jahmyr Gibbs has been unleashed. Whoa. Quick take on Jahmyr Gibbs. Is he still really good starter every week when Montgomery comes back? Yes or no, Lou?
Yeah.
Sharples?
You still start him every week, but he won't hit those heights because Montgomery is a renowned touchdown thief.
Yes. McCaffrey at 2. The Gus Edwards at 3. Alvin Kamara is playing great at the minute. He was 4, and Travis Etienne 5. Austin Eckler with a nice game as well. CeeDee Lamb had a day as the number 1 wide receiver. Hopkins, we've apologised to the man. AJ Brown's having a year. Tyreek Hill hit 1,000 yards on the season. And Jamar Chase as well. But elsewhere, Waddle, Dotson, Shaheed, Cheeky Gabe, Devonta Smith, Jamison Crowder, still playing apparently. Tyler Lockett, Jordan Addison, yeah. And tight end, McBride, Kittle, Taysom Hill, TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, Komet and Njoku, Kincaid, Engram, and Thomas. Tight end scoring. Pretty
that McBride
pretty good this
game,
week.
wow.
No Kelsey, though.
Yeah. McBride, 10 receptions, 95 yards, a touchdown, 14 targets. Whoa.
Oh, yeah. But the busts. Alexander Mattison, I mean, this is par for the course for Mattison. I don't think he's a very good... Maybe Dalvin Cook was really is washed this year because he must have been incredible at the Vikings because these lot cannot run the ball. Or maybe Alexander Mattison's just terrible. Tony Pollard, this was a hard one because the Cowboys put up so many points and played so well, but they just didn't need him. Mahomes was sick, as we said.
Sick.
Isaiah Pacheco, Devontae Adams, I'm sure we'll get into, but he did not enjoy his game. Neither did Jacoby Myers in the same game. Aaron Jones, really not great. I had to double check that Aaron Jones didn't leave the game or something, but no, just didn't get used. Lamar Jackson, good win for the Ravens, but not a great fantasy day. And, oh boy, Miles Sanders. Drop him, get out, he's done. There's a bad deal, bad kind of acquisition by the Panthers. It's Chuba Hubbard. Miles Sanders is a bad player, which is so sweet for me because I think I've already said on the podcast how a few years ago he single-handedly knocked me out of the fantasy playoffs. So, yeah.
And then kept me out of it the following year after when I drafted him second round. I hate you, Miles.
Heading for the booth. There's a couple quarterbacks I've got here that I don't think are going to be playing anywhere next year. I'm going to go with the one that I think has got the face for television. He's got the smooth charm. Jimmy G.
Oh,
Jimmy G.
Yeah,
I think he's got a smooth voice. He's got the lovely face to when we pan back up to the booth when we're talking. He's pretty suave. I'd listen to Jimmy G talk about some Monday night football, some Thursday night football.
Smile.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Lou, do you agree?
Yeah. I was going to go Ryan Tannehill. I think Ryan Tannehill's got a bit more of a rugged charm. He's a bit more of a journeyman, which is what we like on it in our colour commentators. Maybe not the prime time ones, but it might flick to a red zone game. And there's a random commentator, and then Ryan Tannehill's in the booth. You know what I mean? Like a bit of a Matt Ryan this year. These guys are done. They are done. We're complimenting them. They are done. So, yeah.
Big time. Well, let's look at last week's projection beers, shall we? So, I mean, clearly Sharples won. Clearly Sharples has won because it was ridiculous to say this out loud, but Sharples' tight end pick, scored a 30-yard rushing touchdown and threw an interception.
Wild card.
Wild card, yeah. Wild card. So, Taysom Hill, big time hit. I assume you're going to put Taysom Hill in again. Jordan Addison hit. Derrick Henry, nice game, not quite a hit. And Gardner Minshew, he had a passable game. You were fine if you played Minshew. Lou Prescott went off 28 fantasy points, as did Gus Edwards, 29 fantasy points. Christian Kirk, unfortunately, a quiet game for him. And Dalton Schultz was a bit of a bust as well, unfortunately. Jared Goff, just not a miss for me. It was a disappointing game by Goff, but as we saw, Gibbs got all the work there, the running back. Breece Hall, 21 fantasy points. Deontay Johnson was a couple of decimal places away from being a hit. He had a nice game, and as I predicted, Deontay Johnson's the number one at the Steelers. I said this. He's a target machine. And Evan Ferguson caught a lovely, lovely touchdown right down the middle. Prescott was just peppering the end zone from like anywhere within 35 yards. It was nice to see some aggressiveness. But we've got a bit of a bumper news section, haven't we, Lou?
We do, just because we've got quite a lot of injuries, and also it was the trade deadline as well. We'll start with the injuries. Kirk Cousins, this is gutting. Kirk Cousins, torn Achilles. He's done for the year. Maybe done in Minnesota because of the way his contract is working. Listen, the Vikings' record sort of goes against this, but if you just look at Cousins' numbers, he was playing MVP caliber football. Really, if you look at the numbers, he was having a great year, and this is gutting for Cousins and for that team. But yeah. Cousins he's done for the year. Matthew Stafford exited the Rams game with a thumb injury, UCL sprain in his throwing hand thumb, and he's considered day-to-day, so definitely monitor that one. Kenny Pickett left the Steelers game near half-time with a rib injury after a pretty big hit. Apparently he's questionable going into the Thursday night game, but he says he's good to go, so there you go. Desmond Ridder, this is an interesting one. Exited the Falcons game with an apparent concussion, but passed all concussion tests at halftime, was cleared to return, but he didn't return. Arthur Smith opting to roll with Taylor Heineke, the backup, and Heineke was better, more efficient, really.
I love the thought of like all the doctors being like, yeah, he's passed with flying colours. He doesn't have even a trace of a concussion, and Arthur Smith's like, I've just got a bad feeling on this.
No, Arthur Smith's like, so he's concussed. I heard concussion. Doctors I know he can play. I hear you. He can
definitely play. He can definitely play. I just want to be really sure about this. I think I'm going to give him a couple of weeks.
Yeah. No. We're telling you, he's cleared to play. He's on the bench. Got you, loud and clear.
Yeah. He's running onto the field. Smith just tackled him. It's for your own good.
Yeah. Tyrod Taylor, better quarterback for the Giants, left the game in the second quarter, also with a rib injury. He was taken to hospital but discharged the following day. Considered week to week, but Daniel Jones is going to be back this week. So
can I just say, by the way, sorry, Lou, the Falcons news, that means Heineken's in, doesn't it? Good old.
Well, we'll get to it.
Right. Okay. Sorry.
If you leave me to it, mate.
Sorry. I wanted to chat about Heineken. Crispin.
Yes,
Steve.
I've got a little joke as well, but whatever.
Okay.
Darren Waller in the Giants game was also ruled out very early with a hamstring injury. Always has hamstring injuries, so this isn't good. Apparently, it isn't even the same hamstring injury that hampered him sort of at the start of the season as well. Who knows? But apparently Darren Waller has more than one hamstring on his right leg.
I don't think you know enough about anatomy to make that joke.
I was telling the joke and I was like, you very well could. Could have like 10. So, ignore me. And then another gutting one, really. Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver for the Patriots, suffered a torn ACL in the loss to the Dolphins. He's done for the season. Real shame, because Bourne was having a nice season and looked like the go-to option in New England, and now New England are stuck again with no real standout wide receivers. And that's it for the injuries. Moving on to the news, we had the trade deadline this week. A couple of notable moves. The Vikings trade for Josh Dobbs, which I think is a confusing one, because yes, Josh Dobbs has been a fine player for Arizona. He is decent, but number one, the Vikings have Nick Mullins, who they're pretty, they like quite a lot as their backup, and he obviously knows that offense very well. And number two, you aren't winning a Super Bowl with Josh Dobbs or Nick Mullins. So, I mean, obviously you do like to see it. You like to see teams still competing, still playing, but I don't get why you'd give up stuff to go and get Josh Dobbs when you already have a backup there who is going to do you a serviceable job. Interesting move for me. I'm not really sure what to make of it. Just quickly on that, lads, what do you think about
that? I think that it's all credit to Josh Dobbs for kind of showing what he's shown in Arizona. But yeah, the way you put it, Lou, it's a bit like just go and get you the highest draft pick you can, maybe.
Yeah, but also even if you just want to have a bit more integrity than that, you've got a guy, Nick Mullins, who knows the offense, who's been the backup there for a few years now. I don't really understand the logic of giving away future picks for a guy who is going to compete for the starting job. I mean, it's already been said that Josh Dobbs isn't starting this week, so who knows anyway. The Lions have traded with the Cleveland Browns for Donnie Peeps J.
DPJ.
Probably because of Marvin Jones being out, they've gone and got Donnie Peeps J. Good receipt, Donovan Peoples-Jones, by the way. Good player. I like this move. He's a good player. That is a really nice wide receiver room now for the Lions. Maybe a little bit unnecessary, but, whatever. And then the 49ers trade a third-round pick to the Commanders for Chase Young. Now, I think that third round says all you need to know about how he did not live up to the hype in Washington, really. A mid-round pick for this guy, for a number 2 overall pick, just shows you. I've said this in the past. I don't think he's a bum or anything like that, but he has not lived up to the hype. Maybe he gets behind a more cohesive defensive scheme and a better organisation. It brings out the best in him. I hope it does for the guy, but at this moment in time, third rounder, you could. Some people are going to be making the argument that the Commanders got, absolutely fleeced, highway robbery, whatever. That's what they valued him as, and they're the guys who see him week in, week out. So,
Like, what is it, 3 years after drafting a guy? Is it 3 or 2 years after drafting the guy second overall, they value him as a third rounder?
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. And then just a bit more news as well. The Raiders, they've fired head coach Josh McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler. There we go. And they've also said rookie Aidan O'Connell he's going to be the starter moving forward. So Caleb Williams, start looking for houses in Vegas, my friend.
Yeah, McDaniels is just an awful head coach. Terrible. Shocking, bad.
I know, but like, they got to pay the guy for another 4 years. Wow. Like, okay, there we go. Sit back on that, Josh McDaniels, and then crack open a cold one. Get the ice buckets out, guys. Crack open a cold Heineken.
Oh, that was the joke.
Because the Falcons named Taylor Heineken the starting quarterback. This very vague situation, similar to last year with Marcus Mariota as well, when Ridder actually came in and became the starter. Very vague, it's all sort of a bit like, oh, well, Ridder, he's not really concussed, but he is, but we're going to keep him out just in case. And we're going to put Heineke. It's really strange. Taylor Heineke, I think, is a better player anyway, so here we go. I mean, yeah.
Heineken can sling it, absolutely. He can sling it.
He can.
I wonder if Belichick's going to welcome McDaniels back with open arms. What do you think?
Yeah, because they all come crawling back. They all come crawling and crying back to Bill.
It's mid-season review time. We've been through 8 weeks of the 2023 NFL season. And I want to know, first of all, lads, who your current fantasy MVP is. We'll start with you, Sharples.
I thought this was a bit of a tough one because it's one of them. It's like, how do you interpret it? Is it a guy that was drafted low and has been unexpectedly good, or is it just the out and out leaders? So, a few people I considered, Puka Nacua, Mostert, currently sitting at RB3, absolute madness. But in the end, I just thought, who's the guy that I want on my team most? And Tyreek Hill. Obviously, first round pick, but he was going towards the end. I think he was probably going 6, 7, 8 slot. So, I think unless you drafted McCaffrey in those opening picks, you're probably disappointed with who you picked if you didn't take him. It's just unbelievable. He's obviously number one wide receiver, averaging around about 26 points a game. Yeah, what more can I say? He's the person that I want most on my team, and he's the person that I fear most when I play them because he's just going to erupt every week. So yeah, a bit of a boring one, but Tyreek Hill for me.
I'm going to go Travis Etienne, and maybe this is because I've got Travis Etienne on a team, and every week for the past month I've looked and he's just gone completely off and won me my matchup that week. But I mean, he's averaging 20 points a game, and that's with a down week in week 2. But you look at his fantasy points from the past 4 weeks: 36, 23, 22, 25. He looks incredible as well. Apparently, he was questionable to return on Sunday. Then all of a sudden, you saw him run in a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. It was a second round pick. I think he was about maybe a mid to late second round fantasy pick, and he's currently the running back 2. We know that McCaffrey's going to be the running back 1 if he's on the field. So yeah, I just think Etienne's been a bit of a revelation. For me as well, who kind of wrote him off a little bit before the season, I've just been super impressed and super kind of surprised by what Etienne's shown. Luke?
Yeah, I mean, as you were sort of alluding to at the beginning, Sharples, like, it's easy to pick sort of, I think it's easy to pick McCaffrey or Hill or AJ Brown for this pick, guys who are undeniably having an amazing season, but you drafted those guys in the top 15 picks. They were drafted to be elite, top 5 of the positions, that's what's expected. And I think it's also easy to go for these borderline undrafted stars like Mostert, Nacua, Thielen, who've been, incredibly valuable for your team. But those players, you didn't risk anything when you drafted them or picked them up, and they just end up being an incredibly pleasant surprise, like, oh, I've got an elite player out of nowhere. So I wanted to go for a player who you drafted as a starter but wasn't a superstar or a surefire hit, but you just hope they were going to exceed their ADP and truly break out. So I've also got Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
Drafted in the 3rd round, 28th overall was the ADP, running back 10. Currently the running back 2, 7th in total fantasy points across all positions, including quarterback, averaging 20.49 points per game. And I think this form's sustainable. I think Etienne's going to be easily a top 5, maybe a top 3 guy rest of season. And if this doesn't exemplify him as the MVP more, tell me what does. These are the guys drafted around him in terms of ADP. Ramondre Stevenson, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Najee Harris, Devonta Smith, Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
Do I need to say more than that? This guy's the fantasy MVP.
You had the whole Tank Bigsby thing before the season, and Etienne can only do a certain thing, which a lot of us, like me included, bought into. He's been great. Real life MVP. Who's your favourite to win it so far at this moment in time, Lou? Real life MVP.
This is a really difficult one because it's gonna be a bloody quarterback, isn't it? It's always a quarterback. I've written like 5 names here, but I'm just gonna go for the one that I ended up seemingly writing the most convincing argument for. This is maybe some fantasy sort of stuff, but whatever. I've gone Christian McCaffrey, because 944 total yards so far. That's 31% of his entire team's offensive yards. Almost a third of the team's yards go through McCaffrey. That is ridiculous. 13 total offensive touchdowns. That is 50% of the 49ers' offensive touchdowns. Here's one for you, lads. What do the Giants, Jets, Steelers, Buccaneers, Titans, Patriots, Panthers, Raiders, Falcons, and Bengals all have in common?
They have less yards than Christian McCaffrey.
No, they all have fewer offensive touchdowns than Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
Yeah.
Rushing yards, I meant less rushing yards. Yeah.
He leads the league in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, rushing first downs, even over Jalen Hurts and the tush push, and running back receiving yards. This offense is Christian McCaffrey, and I don't think you could, there's a couple more players, I guess, who I think one of you two might be talking about who you could say that about the team, but McCaffrey gets it done in all phases of this offense, and he's the one who I wrote the most convincing argument for, so I'm going to say McCaffrey should be the MVP.
Sharps.
And it's a great team, and he's on a great team.
Okay. Sharples?
I don't personally agree with this one, but I interpreted this one as who do I think is going to win it, and so I think it'll be Jalen Hurts because he's the quarterback of what I think will be the team with the best record. I was looking at the actual odds when I looked into it. Tua Tagovailoa is second favourite to win MVP at just over 4.5 to 1, whereas Tyreek Hill, the person who is probably the reason that he's in the MVP conversation, is something like 50 to 1. Which I think is completely ludicrous. For me, if it was up to me, it would either be McCaffrey or Hill. I have to say Lou made a very convincing argument for McCaffrey then. But in reality, it'll probably be the quarterback of the team that finishes with the best regular season record, which I think will be the Eagles. And therefore, even though he wasn't as good as last year, it'll be Jalen Hurts.
I kind of want to echo a lot of what Sharple said in terms of the team with the best record and in terms of the reason why maybe the quarterback is doing so well.
It's because the quarterback touches the ball on every offensive play pretty much, which is why it's like, that they're the leading candidate for it because they do run the offense. All I'm saying with McCaffrey is you've got a player there who he feels like he touches the ball on every play for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Where was I? In terms of the kind of player that is maybe the reason why the quarterback on the best team is so good. And to be honest with you, when I wrote, this is the first name that came to mind, and to me, it's not really close. I think the current real-life MVP and the person who should win it is A.J. Brown. We talk about Tyreek Hill being over 1,000 yards. Well, A.J. Brown's going to be over 1,000 yards after this next week, and the Eagles are 7-1, and Brown looks completely unstoppable. Even when the Eagles' running game can't really get going like it couldn't this past week. AJ Brown all the way for me, I'm afraid. I have to say.
I got a little stat about AJ Brown, which is actually Tyreek Hill can't even say this. AJ Brown accounts for 46% of his team's passing yards right now.
Well, there we go. Thank you. Back my point. I think AJ Brown has to be in consideration. Super Bowl Picks. I'm standing firm. Thankfully, after this past week, I'm sticking with Bengals versus Eagles, what I said at the start of the season, which, as I say, is a lot easier after this past week. Lou, Super Bowl, who's going?
See, I would have great pleasure standing by my original pick, and the only reason I'm not doing is because it brings me even more pleasure to say that I'm changing one of these teams. I'm still going with the Chiefs. But it's going to be the Chiefs versus the Cowboys in the Super Bowl.
We're going to beat them as well. We're actually going to beat them and we're going to win the whole thing. Sharples.
Sharples looking very, very,
listen,
very disapproving.
I'm just going to enjoy it when you build your hopes up, and then you two empty shell of men the day afterwards. Well, actually, you're not even going to get to the Super Bowl, so I don't even know why I'm entertaining this wild theory. I said it was going to be the Bills versus the Eagles, and I think that if the Bills play the Dolphins in the postseason, the Bills will win. So I'm going to stick firm as well and say it's going to be the Bills-Eagles.
I love it. I love the conviction. And I love the utter just blind optimism from Lou as well.
Guys still have a little bit of credit if it's the Chiefs 49ers. I'm just changing it just because I think we're going to win. That's why I'm changing it.
You've got no credit.
Standing strong. I was wobbling then. I was wobbling for a minute then. But no. Chiefs, Cowboys.
The place where you've got no credit, and this kills me as a Cowboys fan, is that you don't have the Eagles in there for me. That's what you're doing, mate. Anyway.
Well, you're going to see this week. You're going to see this week why the Eagles aren't in there and the Cowboys are.
Okay, well, anyway, I mentioned us playing a trick on the audience before. And at this mid-season review, I want to compare our projection beaters this year to last year.
Oh,
no, we did.
Do you really want to do that?
We did change up the formula a bit this year, so it's easier to get a bust and harder to get a hit. So bear that in mind, everyone, please. This time last year, we collectively had 18 misses or busts, including 2 gooses, and 31 hits.
You got them.
Lou, you'd missed 2 weeks, by the way. You'd missed 2 weeks. I think you got the gooses though. So that's 18 miss, 31 hits. This year, we currently have 27 miss, so that's up by 9, and 20 hits, down by 11. But luckily, it's time to admit that we played a big old prank on the audience with the projection beaters for the first week of the season. Got you, everyone. Haha. Mm-hmm. And that joke's over now. So we can just do actual proper ones from now on.
Agreed. And before we go on any further, just want a quick shout out to NFL Store and Fanatics. If you're after some NFL gear, maybe a jersey of your favourite team, no matter who that is, they stock the bad teams' jerseys as well. Sharples, looking at you, Jets fan.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you want other merch, hoodies, caps, actual full-size collectible helmets, or clearance items, maybe a Chase Young Washington Commanders jersey. They've never been cheaper, I've heard. Here at In the Pocket Across the Pond, we're very happy to bring you some promo codes to the listeners. Use the promo code TOUCHBACK, all one word, all capital letters, 25% off your order. And promo code NFL Free Ship, all caps, all one word, to get free UK shipping. And if you go to the store via the link that will be in our description, we'll get a smidge of kickback from that as well. That's NFL Store, link in the description. Yeah.
Does it seem like we should be getting paid for this based on that last section? Those.
NFL Store, link in the description, on to week 9.
Yes. Quick look at some waiver pickups. People that are rostered in less than 50% of ESPN leagues. Lou, who have you got?
I'm going Josh Dobbs, because I was just railing on him just then a little bit. But when he does eventually, I think, become the starter of the Vikings, I think that's good news for the receiving game. Josh Dobbs has proved to be a pretty fantasy-relevant player in Arizona, and he gets sort of arguably a better offense to play with here. So I think, if you've lost Cousins, you might not be able to plug him in straight away while he gets acclimatized, but I think Dobbs is worth a pickup. And then Demario Douglas, who is sort of the only other New England Patriots wide receiver who showed signs of life, especially in the last couple of weeks. He's had a couple of nice games, so Kendrick Bourne being out, Demario Douglas might be getting a bit more work.
Sharps?
Had to include my ride or die this week. Rostered in only 29.2% of leagues. Taysom Hill, tight end of the New Orleans Saints. It's getting to the point, lads, where it's not just a flash in the pan. The past 3 weeks, he's been improving. I think it was 12, 16, and then 20 points or so last week. It's starting to look like him in this wildcat formation is a certified part of the offense. And when you're putting someone like that in the tight end position, it's going to get you points. So act on it now before everyone else does. And I'm sure people have got room on the bench for a lovely young man. I think Taysom Hill can be that young man. And if they've also got room for a not very nice young man, but one who is undoubtedly a talented football player coming off a long injury, Kyler Murray, rostered in 34% of leagues. He was supposed to come back in week 10, but rumours are he's been seeing Aaron Rodgers' doctor, and he might be back in week 9. Listen, I don't know what you're going to get from him. I thought he was going to be my MVP last year, and he was absolutely terrible. But he's had plenty of time to study film while he's being away. And like I said, undeniably, he's a great football player. We don't know what we're going to get. I mean, realistically, you might get him and he might do absolutely nothing. It might take until next season for it to come back. But, you know what I mean? If you're circling the drain, you're at 2-5, 2-6, might as well take a punt on him, see what you got.
Yeah, well, the only worrying thing there is that he should have been studying film. But if you look at his Call of Duty account, he's about 10th prestige. Is that a thing? Is that a thing?
That was a thing, was it? It was prestige when you unlocked everything and then you
went back to the
start. Didn't have anything
That's
again.
what prestige is, isn't it? Right? I've not played.
I don't think I ever prestiged
I've not played
anything.
Call of Duty in about a decade, so I was gambling with that joke. But I want to piggyback off that, Sharples, and say if we're kind of gambling on Murray playing, and I'll be honest, I'm still not 100% until I see him on the field that he's going to play this year, but with the rumblings that are coming out of Arizona, I think it's worth preempting this and picking up Rondale Moore and Trey McBride. So obviously, Trey McBride, tight end, Zach Ertz is on IR, and McBride looked great last week anyway. But if Murray's in there, it's an upgrade for all the pass catchers. Hollywood Brown's everywhere. He should be rostered everywhere. Rondale Moore could see some play. I think over Michael Wilson, I think Rondale Moore is the guy. Mainly because he just doesn't sound like a made-up person.
Michael
As well,
Wilson.
I suppose. Yeah, Michael
Default
Wilson.
character.
Yes.
I'm sure he's a very lovely man who have family that love him.
Yeah. The Wilson family.
Assuming.
Yes. Teams on bye this week. Jaguars, 49ers, Lions, Denver. Maybe the harshest bye week of the year for fantasy so far. Next week is harsher, though. I will say that. So it's the time of year for streaming options, for thinking smartly. So hopefully we're going to be able to give you some players that you can stream. But first of all, of course,
forget about it.
It's the forget about it. It's players that are locked into your lineup no matter what. Don't even think about it if you have this person on your bench. You're stupid, or you're playing a 4-team league. So quarterback, Jalen Hurts, Pat Mahomes. Not sick this week, but sick in the good way. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
Forget about it.
Running back, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs. I think Josh Jacobs gets a bit of a boost of energy from the sacking. Johnny T's the biggest smash player of the week, I'm calling it. Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, and Raheem Mostert.
Forget about it.
Wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, another player that I expect a big bounce back from. Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Jamar Chase, and CeeDee Lamb.
Forget about it.
And at the tight ends, Kelsey, Hockenson, Andrews, Kittle, Laporta. For the good of the brand, Taysom Hill will never be a forget about it. We cannot condone that.
Forget about it.
But we'll get on to our projection beaters. Players who we think are going to beat their ESPN projections by 4 or more fantasy points, as I say, becomes really pertinent in these weeks where we all need streamers, especially at the quarterback position. Sharples, who's yours?
I've gone for Derek Carr, projected 14.5 points against a Bears team that has given up the 3rd most points to fantasy quarterbacks. And I just think the New Orleans offense has come alive the past couple of weeks. I think they've scored almost 40 in the last 2 games. The yardage is picking up. He's thrown for 300 yards in the past 3 games in a row, and I just think it's a beatable score. against a bad team. So what Morris said, Derek Carr against the Bears.
Lou?
I'm going to roll once again with Dak Prescott like I did last week. Projected 17.4 fantasy points. Coming off the best game, coming off his best game of the year so far, Prescott, he looked great, assured under centre. The game script for the Cowboys it's flipped on its head a little bit, really. It seems like they're more willing to hurl the ball out and throw it when they're playing with a lead, as opposed to, a team would stereotypically control it with the ground game if that was the game script. But I don't think that is going to be what happens this week. Most important game of the season so far, away against the Eagles. It's going to be a tough matchup for the Cowboys to play from ahead in this game. So that sort of made me hesitant to start Prescott, but I was looking at the numbers, and this season I'm not that hesitant to play him against the Eagles because they've been utterly dreadful against passing attacks. They're giving up 267 passing yards and two passing touchdowns per game, almost 19 fantasy points a game, 2 quarterbacks. They're truly exploitable at secondary. Prescott has the weapons to take advantage of it. It'll be a tough task away from home, fierce divisional opponent, but we know the Eagles can put up yards and points. I'm backing the Cowboys to put up plenty of their own, primarily through the passing game.
Nice. I will just go back to Derek Carr really quickly. Obviously, it's a streaming week for quarterbacks, and Carr is the number one pickup on the Sleeper fantasy app, so people are thinking like you are, Sharples, on the whole. I think I'm going to go CJ Stroud, though. Projected 16.2 versus Tampa Bay. Stroud's averaging 16.5 fantasy points so far this year, even after the down week this past week versus the Panthers, in what you thought should have been a smash play, really, but instead he failed to throw a touchdown. But we're not a luxury to wait and see this week. As I've mentioned, we need streaming quarterbacks with 4 teams on a bye week. So I think Stroud is a really strong one. Tampa Bay, they're not the defense that they were in previous years. They're allowing 17 fantasy points a game to the quarterback position and the 5th most passing yards per game. Now, we know this Texans team super pass heavy. We know that Stroud is really talented. And really, I don't think, as I mentioned, there are many more better streaming options kind of in terms of matchup, in terms of talent, in terms of opportunity. So yeah, I expect Stroud to have a really nice game and kind of look like he did in the first month of the season. Let's go running back, Sharps.
I've gone for Rachaad White, running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Projected 13.3 points. He's not really had a breakout game. He got 21 points in week 2, but just recently, the past couple of games, the receiving work he's had has been unbelievable. 6 and 7 receptions respectively for 65 yards and 70 yards. It's just the groundwork that's been a little bit lacking. He's not run for 50 yards yet in the last 4 games. But Houston are a middling to back end team against the run, and I just think when you've got that kind of consistent volume in the receiving game, then you're in for a big week. 13.3 again, I think a beatable score. If we can just add a little rushing touchdown there, then I think we'll be smashing it. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good week for Rachaad White.
Lou?
I'll go with Chuba Hubbard. Projected 9.4 points. It's crazy to me that in a matchup against the Colts, who have been giving up over 28 points per game to teams, who just gave up 3 rushing touchdowns and a running back receiving touchdown to the Saints this week, that the starting quarterback on a team against them is only projected 9.4 fantasy points. Yeah, Hubbard's the starter for the Panthers. On the season, he has more rushing yards, rushing attempts, receiving yards, and receptions than Sanders. Even if you look at last week coming out of the bye, Sanders was cleared to play after he missed week 6 with an injury. It was Hubbard who got the overwhelming majority of the workload out of the backfield. Obviously, isn't working for Sanders in Carolina. I would say that Hubbard is clearly the better back, and now it looks as though he's been treated as such by the offense and by the team. So 9.4 is this projection a bit of a trap? do people know something that we don't? All I know is Hubbard's a talented back. He's going to get the majority of the work in a game against the Colts, who are producing absolute blockbuster games week to week because of their ability to score points and also concede points at a ridiculous rate. The Colts are a team whose matchups you want to target and exploit. The over-under for this game is 44 points, and the Panthers are actually favoured by 2.5 points, giving them a healthy implied point total. I can't see how Hubbard isn't a really strong start this week.
And I'm going to go Joe Mixon, projected 15.2 versus Buffalo. I'm hoping for points in this one, especially from the Bengals, of course, and I do think Mixon gets in the end zone, mainly because he has 100% of this team's goal-to-go carries this season. I think it's about 11. Mixon is and has been for several years the guy in the running back room in Cincinnati. Plus, these are two teams going in opposite directions to me. The Bills haven't played particularly well in about a month and are bottom 10, in rush defense, whereas the Bengals, they're heating up. There's a lot of fancy points to go around on this team. Tight end, Sharples.
Oh, you already know. Projected a hefty 6.7.
It's creeping up. It's creeping up.
Yeah, it's creeping up. It was 4.5, then 5.5. I mean, people are catching on. My boy, beautiful, sculpted from stone. Is he going to receive a touchdown? Is he going to throw a touchdown? Is he going to rush it in? Is he going to kick a field goal? Who knows? All I know is Taysom Hill at tight end this week.
Oh, yeah. Lou?
I'm going to go David Njoku, projected 10.4. High projection, sure. Pretty tough matchup again against the Cardinals, who, unlike every other season, the Cardinals have actually been pretty decent against opposing tight ends. But Njoku seen 17 targets in the last two games, and he's turned those targets into 9 receptions, 131 yards, and a touchdown. So I'm going to roll with the hot hand. I'm picking Njoku this week as a solid starter at tight end.
And I'm going to go Cade Otton. Projected a modest 7.3 at Houston. Well, not so modest for tight end, I suppose. However, he is against the 30th ranked tight end defense in the Texans. He's also had 6 targets in the previous 2 games, so I think he can definitely start this guy in a pinch. I would also like to say that although he's not a forget about it, you should be starting Dalton Kincaid. His projection was a bit too rich for me this week, especially looking at those projection beta stats on the season so far. We need some hits. Start Dalton Kincaid. He looks like he's really...
Well, because you've been bold enough to say that, Al, I think that if Dalton Kincaid if he gets less than 4 points below his projection, you should get
2
You
misses.
should get a miss this week.
Okay, I get a miss. Okay.
Because you've been bold enough to say that to the listeners.
Okay. I won't take the hit when he's inevitably a hit, but I will take the miss if he's a miss.
Correct.
But my tight end pick's Cade Otton. Okay,
well, it sounds like you had
Cade Otter.
2 in there, really. Yeah.
Cade Otton.
Yeah.
I didn't even say anything about Kincaid. Such an American
Kincaid
name.
Otton,
Dalton
did
Kincaid.
you say? Sorry. Dalton Kincaid is a very American name.
Yeah.
I think Tank Bigsby is a very American name as well.
Yeah.
Something like Chet Johnson. He's not a player, but that would be an American. He could not be from anywhere else.
Surely there is a player out there called Chet Johnson.
There will be, Lou. There will be. Anyway.
Chad Johnson?
Chad Ochocinco. Speaking of Ochocinco, wide receiver, Sharps.
Yeah, I've gone for Chad Johnson.
Chet. I think you mean Chet Johnson.
Sorry, Chet.
I think you mean Chet Johnson.
Chet Johnson.
Get it right.
4th tier wide receiver for the Falcons. No, I've gone... going back to the Taysom Hill well was very fruitful. So I've gone back to the Jordan Addison well. I know the quarterback's changed. Listen, don't shout at me just yet. The quarterback's changed. But... His projection is reflecting that. He's projected a measly 12.5 points. All he has to do, 16.5 to beat that. He's coming off a 31er and a 21er. I know Kirk Cousins is gone. I know we're uncertain about the quarterback play, but you have to, when you see obscenely low projections like that, you have to attack them. I can't see him busting. He might not be the hit, but I think he's a safe bet. Jordan Addison for 3 touchdowns and 400 yards.
Nice. I mean, if Cousins was still in there, Addison would probably forget about it, but I am very nervy to play him where I've got him, so bit of a confidence boost from Sharples there for Addison owners. Lou?
I'm going Chet Johnson. I'm going with Tank Dell. Projected 11 points, wide receiver for the Texans. Dell missed a few weeks with injuries, and then it was the Texans' bye week, but came back last week in what was, a disappointing game for the Texans' offense, but his utilisation was very promising. You know, saw 4 targets and 3 carries out of the backfield, so this team obviously likes him, knows that he has that explosive ability that he showcased earlier in the season, so they want to manufacture touches for the rookie. This week proves to be a much more favourable matchup for the passing attack of the Texans, as you spoke about, Al, with your stride pick. They face Tampa Bay, who over the past 3 weeks have allowed more receiving yards than anyone else in the league, giving up 299 yards per game through the air in that stint. As often with rookies, specifically wide receiver rookies, we see a post-bye week second half of the season breakout from him. Given, his chemistry that he's showcased with Strayed already, who is going to want to get back on track himself, I think this week's as good as any for that second half breakout to begin for Dell in a very competitive but also exploitable matchup.
Nice. And I'm going to go, let me just check. Falcons.
Chet
Falcons
Johnson.
wide receiver Chet. I'm going to go T. Higgins, doubling down on the Bengals. T. Higgins versus Buffalo. I'll be honest, I originally had Zay Flowers here till really late on in the day, but it came to a start-sit decision in one of my own leagues, and now I don't have Chet Johnson, so I had to think about either Zay Flowers or...
I have him.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to...
So I traded Christian McCaffrey to Sharples for him.
And what a win that was.
Yeah,
So I picked Higgins over Zay Flowers in my own team. So it meant that I had to put Higgins here over Flowers. So why did I put Higgins in my lineup? Even though he's been super underwhelming this season. Well, this Bengals offense, as I mentioned in my Joe Mixon argument, is heating up. Joe Cool is healthy, and he had by far his best completion percentage of the season this past week against San Francisco, who are a really good defense and a really good team. This completion percentage is key. So, although Higgins hasn't had the greatest season so far, if you look at his targets, he's actually averaging higher than he has in his career. He's on about 8, whereas he's had around 7 targets the previous 3 years of his career. So targets are all there, fine. What isn't there, though, is the receptions due to the low catch percentage. It's a career low, actually, at 45.2% catch percentage. It's normally in the 60s. Well, what would you know, though? This Bengals offense gets its you-know-what together this past week, and Higgins has his best catch percentage of the season, on about 83%. So basically, I loved T. Higgins last year. I had him on my championship winning roster, and I'm calling it. The Bengals are back. This offense is back. T. Higgins is a wide receiver 2 again for the rest of the season. Get him in there this week, T. Higgins. Oh, and I also think the Bengals are going to beat the Bills. Regardless of whether it's a shootout or not, the Bengals are going to put up at least 30 points.
You bloody love calling your shot on this show, mate. All these takes that aren't even part of the set. What are you going to say next? Chet Johnson won't get into the Hall of Fame.
I would never say something so ridiculous. Because, of course, they're already etching Chet Johnson's name into the halls at Canton.
I just want to take this time as well to remind you guys and the listeners that there is an asterisk next to Alex's championship team.
There's not. There's not.
I thought you were about to say there's an asterisk next to Chet Johnson. I was like, what are you talking about?
He's first ballot.
There's not. Yeah. And to say there's an asterisk is quite frankly insensitive, I would say. But anyway, game tiers, Sharples. Talk to us about the game tiers, not your bitterness over the loss in the championship last year. Talk to us about the game tiers this week.
I won't talk about accurate
Wipe away
history.
those tears and give us the game tears.
Accurate history that definitely happened. Yeah. Anyway, moving forward, not looking at the very truthful and very recent past. We've got some bad ones, and we've got one which he's definitely in the contender for Toilet Bowl because we talked about them as our worst teams. Raiders Giants will be headlining that Stinkfest.
I did not even know they were playing. Wow, I forgot they were playing each other.
I did not. Oh, goodness me. There's only 3 late games on Red Zone as well, and that's one of them. Oh,
God.
No.
I've also got the Patriots against the Commanders there. Commanders looking like they're throwing in the towel for this season with some of their moves. And I wasn't sure on this one, but I just think with the recent trade, Browns-Cardinals, obviously Browns are a great defense, not too much going forward. I don't know what to expect from the Cardinals. I just think it'll be a bit of a nothing game, really.
Yeah. If you've got the Browns defense, smash play.
Yes, 100%. We've got a lot in the meh category. I'll reel them off. We've got the Steelers against the Titans, Falcons, Vikings, Saints, Bears, Packers, Rams, Texans, Buccaneers, and Jets, Chargers.
Yeah.
But the only real saving grace of that is seeing Chet Johnson burn up that Steelers defense.
Yeah. I would say just seem like fairly boring affairs, which, to be fair, a lot of the games last week did, and scorefest everywhere, so yeah.
A couple in the good. I wanted to put Ravens Seahawks in the great, but I couldn't just quite do it. So they're in the good, and similar to Lou with the way the Colts have been going recently, it could be a bit of a high scoring affair. So I've gone for the Colts Panthers, but equally it could be terrible, that one. But optimistic, boys, optimistic.
Yeah, I like the optimism. I'm a bit lower on the Colts Panthers game, but yeah.
But 3 lovely treats.
Oh, yeah.
In the great category. I'm sure you all know what they are. But it's the Chiefs Dolphins, the Eagles against the Cowboys, and the Bengals against the Bills.
Yes. Great teams. All 3 of the matchups. Fantasy pieces in all the matchups as well. It's exactly what you want. Oh, and that Dolphins Chiefs game.
Can I just say that Dolphins Chiefs game?
It's in the middle of the afternoon.
I just want to say on that, the over-under of that is like 51 points. I would be betting the under on that every single day of the week. The amount of times Chiefs games this year have hit the under, plus we've spoken in the past about how these international games always tend to be a bit rubbish. Yeah. I'm going under all day. On paper, Chiefs Dolphins looks like the game of the week, but I would be looking at the under for that, really.
Hang on. Let me just get... Oh, yes. It was... It finished 21-16 Buccaneers Seahawks in Germany last year. I was wondering whether it was just a London thing, the low scoring games, but the Germany game was pretty low scoring last year as well. Oh, well, cheers for putting it down.
So I'm saying I would put every single penny you have on the under. Don't really do that.
Yeah, don't really do that. I mean, it's going to be nice to see Tyreek Hill and Pat Mahomes on the same field again, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it. Any closing thoughts? Do not mention in the closing thoughts section the guy that you just made up.
I didn't make anyone up. Oh, Chet Johnson.
Yes.
All right, whatever. Yeah, you made up a guy before, Michael Wilson.
Of course, yeah. Damn, I started it off. Closing thought, I just have a quick question for you. One word answer. Where will Kirk Cousins play his next NFL game, Lou?
Minnesota Vikings.
Sharps.
I think he's done.
What?
I think he's done.
He's done? No.
You heard it here first, everyone. I'm going to say Washington Commanders, by the way.
Oh.
bit of a reunion, and I know that Shanahan and the 49ers love him and I've wanted him for ages, but some of us on this podcast are still big fans of Brock Purdy. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Enjoy Week 9. Enjoy seeing the Cowboys stomp the Eagles. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.